Welcome to the Medlock Post. And yes, we got our music straightened out with Epidemic Sound. There was a technical glitch that we finally worked out, or they did. Thank them very much for that. So we will have some music now, and so delighted to do that. I'm your host, Richard G. Medlock. And again, let me start with our disclaimer. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are those of the host, and the views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or other podcast streaming services. Okay, that's the disclaimer. Now there's an announcement to make. We can be heard on different podcast providers. They are Tumblr, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and coming is Google Podcast. Now that might be already up. I did not check this morning. I've been running like crazy this morning. And we're working with Apple Podcast to get set up with them. So there are other platforms that you can listen to us. And you can also go to medlockpost.blogspot.com. I put them up there, and plenty of places to listen. Also, my email is medlockpost@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts and ideas and suggestions. So appreciate it. This is, again, a great day in America. Started out the program with the Star-Spangled Banner, which always just gives me chills. And I'm glad it still does. If the Star-Spangled Banner lost its meaning to me, that's a sad day. It really is. The opening monologue today is entitled, well, let me give you the title of the show. Good Solutions for America. Good Solutions for America. Now, my opening monologue is the Great American Revival of 2022. Many media pundits and politicians like to refer to the Great Global Reset when they talk about plans to destroy the American way of life. But instead of talking about that reset, our conversations and actions should be focused on the Great American Revival. Yes, revival. And you said, well, he just stole this from Trump. Well, maybe I did, but this is what we're looking at. Great American Revival. America and we the people need to return to the basics. The basics. Remember the phrase we used to use all the time, KISS, K-I-S-S? Keep it simple, stupid. Well, that way of thinking needs to return because it proved to be very successful in planning, understanding, and progress. When ideas and discussions become too complicated, confusion and chaos develop. Unfortunately, that's where we are in America today. And many believe that complication, the confusion and the chaos is by design. All right, here is probably some of the good solutions, the title of the show, to bring out. There are 9 ways that we the people can successfully bring about the Great American Revival. Number 1 is the 10 Commandments. Now, even if you're not a religious person, most of you have heard or read the 10 Commandments. They are as meaningful today to us as when Moses received them on the Mount. By applying them in our lives, we will find great strength to fight the good fight. Because that's what we're in today, is a fight. Take the time to ponder how these laws and principles have been perverted and ignored. Then think of ways how they can become a stronger influence in American society. Influence on us personally, our families, and in society. Well, let me just quickly go over them, the 10 Commandments. They're not hard. You shall have no other gods before me. And this can refer, different religions look at God in different ways, and that's fine. And those gods have given laws. But the main one is, have no other gods. Number 2, you shall make no idols. Wow, okay. Number 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord God in vain. 4, keep the Sabbath day holy. 5, honor your father and your mother. 6, you shall not murder. Number 7, you shall not commit adultery. Number 8, you shall not steal. Simple. Number 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Number 10, you shall not covet. Now, we could spend a whole program talking about those 10 commandments, those simple rules, principles to follow, and how they have been ignored. And we might do that. Number 2, parents, make your children and family a high priority in your life. Quote, the home is the most effective place to learn the lessons of life: truth, honor, virtue, self-control, the value of education, honest work, and the purpose and privilege of life. Nothing can take the place of home in rearing and teaching children, and no other success can compensate for failure in the home. Unquote. As David O. McKay, a religious leader from the 40s and 50s. Number 3, study and understand the United States Constitution. You're going to hear me talk about that over and over and over. Know and understand where our freedoms come from and how we can successfully defend them. Alexander Hamilton taught us, quote, the present Constitution is the standard to which we are to cling. Under its banners, bona fide must we combat our political foes, rejecting all challenges, but through the channel itself provides for amendments. Unquote. There was a lot said in there. But the Constitution is the rule of law. Now, have we added amendments, which he's talking about here? The channel itself provides for amendments. But these were agreed to through the proper process, not through executive actions or unlawful acts. Now, when we the people hold up the Constitution to tyranny, the Constitution and America win. Let me repeat that. This is me talking. When we the people hold up the Constitution to tyranny, the Constitution and America win. And you can put quotes around it if you want to, and my name. And speaking of my name, I've had some people say, why do you say Richard G. Medlock? And that's a great question. And we'll get to number 4 here. Let me explain this. There are a lot of Richard Medlocks out there. One, a cousin, he goes by Ricky. He just retired a couple of years ago. He was a CFO for a bank, but it was Richard Medlock. If you go on, I think it's YouTube, there's a couple of Richard Medlocks that do fishing videos. There's a Richard Medlock, or Rick Medlock, that's a singer-songwriter. He does some pretty good music. There's a doctor, there's an attorney. So if you search Richard Medlock, you're going to get a lot of people. But if you search Richard G. Medlock, most of the time you get me. So that's why it's Richard G. Medlock. Okay, number 4 in our list. Follow the admonition of the founding fathers. There's an old adage that says, quote, "A people must from time to time refresh themselves at the wellspring of their origin, lest they perish," unquote. This is a powerful reminder that we need to maintain that understanding of where we came from, even our ancestors, the history that surrounded us getting to this point, and understanding where we started. And there's even people that say, that's why we study the Bible, is to go back to that wellspring of their origin, or the Talmud, or the Quran, or whatever that might be. Number 5, maintaining our freedoms should be a high priority. Peter Marshall, who was a fabulous religious leader in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, I've read a couple of his books. He was very popular. Quote, "We may think of freedom not to do as we please, but an opportunity to do what is right," unquote. So what he is saying is freedom has responsibilities. Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, they all explain to us that freedom has responsibilities. And Peter Marshall is saying the same thing. It's an opportunity to do what is right, not as we please. Number 6, do not allow the enemies of America and freedom to dominate the debate. Let me repeat that. Do not allow the enemies of America or freedom to dominate the debate. Patrick Henry, and you'll recognize this quote, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death," unquote. These are famous words. These inspired a lot of people and should inspire people today. The sacrifices that we need to make to stay free and to bring the truth out. So we need to be the louder voice for freedom, virtue, values, and moral principles. Number 7, stand up against undesirable elected persons and elect moral people. Wow. Today we have become a nation of rule by man. It has been said that many political leaders think they know more than God. Let me read that again. It has been said that many political leaders think they know more than God. When men become a law unto themselves, only evil will prevail. This is not the American way. Our founding fathers warned us of this happening and gave us the way to correct the problem. Thomas Paine said, quote, "A body of men holding themselves account to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody," unquote. Now, Thomas Paine, it's like, man, he was looking at 2020 and 21 and 22 when he wrote this. He was looking ahead, but he was also looking at history, which taught the founding fathers and others that corrupt governments shouldn't be trusted. They're going to take that power and keep taking and keep taking. And the Constitution was set up to prevent that taking. Number 8, place providence of God at the head of our families, councils, schools, courts, and assemblies. John Quincy Adams said, quote, "From the day of the Declaration, the American people were bound by the laws of God, which they all, and by the laws of the gospel, which they nearly all acknowledged as the rules of their conduct," unquote. We mentioned this earlier in a previous show. Judeo-Christian values. Values, not beliefs, but values and principles. And this is what John Quincy Adams is talking about here. We have these values. They're moral, ethical values. And when we acknowledge them and accept them and apply them to our lives, things go well. But we're off that course, aren't we? We are off that course. Number 9, develop and maintain a high degree of hope. America is not lost. As I read the other day, America is still standing. Who and what is lost are the leaders elected to govern and those that have decided to follow a false ideology. America is still standing because of faithful we the people. America is at war with forces to destroy good and right. Our battles are moving forward and gaining ground as more Americans have decided to stand up and speak up. Thomas Paine was correct when he said, quote, "Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigue of defending it," unquote. We the people are the defenders of freedom, liberty, and justice. We must decide not to grow weary or become fatigued in the good fight. Carry on with strength and foresight. And that's the Medlock Post opening monologue. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm positive. I'm optimistic. I still have faith in America. I still have faith in the Constitution. There are those that are trying to ignore and destroy the Constitution. I have friends, great Americans, served in the military, fought in wars, and they're getting discouraged because they fought for this land. And they're seeing Americans so-called Americans try to bring America down. And they're discouraged. And I have one-on-one conversations with them. And trying to get them to listen to my podcast. All right. On June 20th, I did the value of Juneteenth. The value of Juneteenth. And some of that goes in line with some of the solutions here, because people are taking charge and wanting to move forward and have a better society. And that's one of them. That's a thing that's happening. That's a movement, I guess we can call it. And we talked about the Emancipation Proclamation. That was the 13th, or that is the 13th Amendment, right? Did you know that there was another 13th Amendment? And it almost preserved slavery with Lincoln's support? Did you know that? There was a last-ditch effort to prevent Southern states from seceding on the eve of Abraham Lincoln's presidential inauguration in 1861. Congress passed a constitutional amendment that would have prevented Congress from abolishing slavery in states where it already existed. Isn't that interesting? So here you have a situation, and it was pretty ugly at this point. South Carolina had already seceded from the Union. That was the first state in 1860. And that's where the first battle of the Civil War took place at Fort Sumter outside of Charleston. So I guess there was a thinking that said, if we allow the states that currently have slavery to keep that, maybe we can prevent a war. Because the talk of war was hot and heavy at this point. And some of you might be thinking, isn't that sort of an appeasement? And, maybe it was. Not really sure. But the northern states and others are sitting there going, do we really want a war? Well, I tell you what, let's give them slavery. We're limited to those states, and it probably would not allow it in new states that came in down the road. And but if that territory had slavery, would it be able to stay? I'll have to look into that, get some answers. Lincoln himself gave tacit approval to the amendment in his inaugural speech on March 4th, 1861. Just 2 days after the Senate passed it, 24-12. Now, that's 36. So that means there were 18 states, meeting the two-thirds threshold without a vote to spare. The new president said he had no objection to its being made express and irrevocable. And 2 weeks later, he sent letters to governors of all the states, including those that had seceded, with a copy of the joint resolution to amend the Constitution. The amendment came out of a furious 4-month period between Lincoln's election in November 1860 and his inauguration, when Congress also considered more far-reaching comprehensive compromises that would have allowed the extension of slavery, which Lincoln forcibly opposed. So on. So Abraham Lincoln said, "Let there be no compromise on the question of extending slavery. If there be, all our labor is lost, and ere long must be done again the dangerous ground, that into which some of our friends have a hankering to run. Have none of it. Stand firm. The tug has to come, and better now than any time thereafter. Yours and forever, Abraham Lincoln." Now this is a letter in December 1860 to a senator. And one of the things was just to let slavery go everywhere. And he was against that. So it's interesting that when we look at these things, of course the states didn't approve it. There was no amendment shall be made to the Constitution which will authorize or give to Congress the power to abolish or interfere with any state with the domestic institutions thereof, including that of persons held to labor or service by the laws of said state. That was the amendment. The states didn't go for it. The states, and probably there were enough southern states that kept out the two-thirds majority and say, well, why wouldn't they accept it? Who knows? Who knows? And they might have thought politically it was suicide to do that, to accept that amendment. So the first 13th Amendment failed, which would have maintained slavery in the states that already had it. Little history lesson there for you. That's pretty good, huh? I think everybody by now that's paying any kind of attention saw the video Saturday and since of Joe Biden trying to get off his bicycle, and he fell. Now, folks, I watched the video, and he had little stirrups on the pedals, and his right foot got stuck in that stirrup, and he couldn't get it out, and that's why he fell. There have been all kind of memes about this, and they're making fun of him, and you know, old and senile. He's pictures of him back on the tricycle, and one of them was George Soros pushing him on a training bike, and all this stuff. I mean, it's kind of, and one of them was, this is a symbol of what, or it's symbolic of what Joe Biden has done to the economy. It has crashed, right? So, but folks, let me ask you this question. Especially those that ride bikes. Have you ever fell? Have you ever had an accident? Yeah, and I bet you a lot of you, most of you that ride bikes are sitting there going, yeah, it happens. Whether you're a teenager or a 10-year-old or a 79-plus-year-old. So it happens. The difference here is Joe Biden is a man that received 81 million votes. And you and I haven't received 81 million votes. And notice I didn't say allegedly received. So he sits in the high seat of the land. And then on top of that, for the last couple of weeks, Democrats have started talking about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is getting old. Joe Biden might not have the mental capacity to really be the president. Now, this from Democrats. Now, remember, if Joe Biden leaves the presidency, who becomes president? The vice president, Kamala Harris. Enough said. But anyway, there are Democrats talking about his age, mental capacity, etc., etc. And I don't need to say that. I'm sorry. But let's be careful here. Remember, Harry Truman said, nothing in politics that happens is a coincidence. Everything is planned. Now, why do I say that? This is a maneuver by the Democrats, and it's not as much about Joe Biden as it is about Donald Trump, in my opinion. Because Donald Trump in 2024 will turn 78 in June of that year. He just turned 76. So be wary of this maneuver on the part of the Democrats. They're going to turn it around, and let's say Biden resigns or they exercise the 25th Amendment and take him out on insufficient mental grounds or whatever. They're going to turn around and say, see, do you want an old man in office? Look what happened to Joe Biden. Donald Trump is an old man. You see where I'm going with this? Yeah. So be careful with this maneuver by the Democrats. There's a strategy there. There is a strategy. All right. I have lost my sheet. Where'd my sheet go? That's all right. I have it in front of me. Somewhere. Okay, that's fine. Juneteenth happened on Monday, the first official federal holiday, official recognition, celebrated mostly nationwide. There are still some people that oppose it and so forth. But there are some people, like Representative Al Green, a Democrat, and Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, want to go further. They have introduced a bill called Slavery Remembrance Day. Now, Al Green is from Texas, and he's saying Juneteenth is a celebration of freedom. Slavery remembrance is a commemoration of slavery itself, and it will help us to make sure that we don't see it sanitized. We want to tell the truth about it. Well, Representative Green, I really don't know where it's being sanitized. And we want to tell the truth about it. Well, if the truth isn't being told, and it's being sanitized, it's in these new books that are coming out that have false history, and maybe it's being sanitized in the critical race theory that you're trying to indoctrinate into kids and soldiers and whoever else, even in corporations. So I'm not really sure what you mean by sanitized and tell the truth. People understand slavery is abhorrent, it's ugly, and it should not happen. And I don't hear anybody out there saying that we should have slavery again. If somebody's out there talking about it, let me know. Now, it's just crazy. And then he goes back and refers to 1619, which is the first slave ships coming in. This is the 1619 project, which is all false history, all made up. Even the author has said so. So here, Mr. Green said having a day is dedicated. It's like having Holocaust Remembrance, Pearl Harbor Day, and 9/11. Well, how many people celebrate Pearl Harbor Day today? December 7th, 1941. You hardly hear anything about it. Same thing with the Holocaust. 9/11, it's almost a skip over now. So I'm looking at this, and I have a question for Senators Warren and Representative Al Green. When you talk about slavery Remembrance Day, are you talking about slavery of the blacks, the Negroes, coloreds, as they were referred to then, the white Irish slaves who were the first slaves brought to this continent? Are you including them? Are you including the slavery that was brought upon the Native Americans or the Indians and anybody else that was put into slavery in America? And today we have sex trafficking, which is sex slavery. I've said in 5 and 6 hour seminars on this put on by the police departments, Department of Defense, prosecutors. They bring in forensic nurses that work at hospitals, and that's something I would never talk about on the air. Is the stuff they did. It was just terrible what they see. But they talk about this stuff and talk about the areas in which it is just overwhelming. And you know what was the biggest scare with that? Was that 50% of these young men and women that are put into sex slavery are done so by their family. So their family can make money. So they sell their kids. And what are we doing about that in America? Not a lot. So that's my question for Congressman Green and Senator Warren, and I really don't expect an answer coming from them anytime soon. Did you know that Joe Biden is at war with American families in America? You didn't? Did you know that? He's already threatened schools that if you don't teach transgenderism to kids in school, I'm going to take your lunch money away. You're not going to get any more federal money to feed the kids. Wow. Can he do that? You know, I think he can because they're in power. The Democratic Socialists are in power. Their people run the treasury and make the budgets and so forth. So if they want to stop paying schools, they stop. Hey, you do what we tell you, or you don't get any money. So this is from The Lion. It's about general education, opinion, and parenting. This was written by Michael J. Dillon, Dillon. Most parents would agree that raising our children is equally the most difficult and most rewarding endeavor we have ever undertaken. So why then is the President of the United States dead set on making it even more difficult? Joe Biden is already sending the FBI after parents for speaking out at school board meetings, and his economic policies forcing American households to face down record inflation, high gas and energy prices, baby formula shortages, and food shortages. And yes, this was written June 20th. Last week, the president intensified his attack on American families. And this time, he's aiming squarely at the children. With an executive order on Wednesday, President Biden paved the way for doctors to provide life-altering, often irreversible, gender-affirmative care for children, all without parental involvement or consent. Now, let me repeat this over and over again. An executive order is not law. An executive order is not law. So, defining this, Michael comes out and he says, gender affirmative care means dangerous hormone treatments such as Lupron, which is also used to chemically castrate sex offenders, and permanent and body mutilating sex change operations like the phalloplasty. Let me look at that again. Phalloplasty. Okay. Phalloplasty. It's ironic that the Biden administration continues to claim their policies only support affirming care while simultaneously defending and promoting permanent, harmful, and irreversible sex change operations for children. This is barbaric. I'll be straightforward. The government needs to keep their hands off our children. And parents are waking up to this. And they're fighting back. They're doing it in the schools and they're doing it in other places. This is another thing. I would go to my doctor. I would let them know that if you ever think about doing something like that with my child, watch out. And this is where parents need to sit down and talk with their children and communicate very well with them. That if this starts to be talked to you, you start screaming. If somebody starts talking to you about this, you just start screaming. And if you can leave, leave. Otherwise, just start screaming. This is barbarism, folks. Barbarism. Let me finish today's program with something from C.S. Lewis. Great author, great mind, and I love his stuff. And he wrote this in 1948. And I know you're sitting out there, Richard, why do you go back and pull these things from 70 plus years ago because they're still pertinent today. They still have meaning today. And there's not a lot of people out there saying these things today, and especially not as well as people like C.S. Lewis. Now, this is entitled On Living in an Atomic Age. Now, he wrote this in 1948. The United States had dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II. We were going into the Cold War with the Soviet Union, with communism. And it's uncertain times, because in 1950 we go into a conflict with North Korea. But anyway, let me read this to you, and you can change the words however you like. But he says, quote, "How are we to live in an atomic age? I am tempted to reply, why? As you would have lived in the 16th century when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in a Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night, or indeed as you are already living in an age of cancer, an age of syphilis, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented, and quite a high percentage of us were going to die in unpleasant ways." Now, I know this kind of sounds, whoa, this is dark, but let's continue with C.S. Lewis. This is the first point to be made, and the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, and not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds, unquote. So basically, folks, what he is saying is live your life. Just live your life. Go on, do what's normal for you, and don't let that go. As you can hear, we have a little music in the background telling us that our time is over with. So, folks, this is Tennessee on my mind. So, this is the Medlock Show for today. Thank you very much.